Someone I know threw a birthday party last year. It was a small event. Dinner for 12 people at a restaurant. They had booked the place weeks in advance for the celebration. One guest with 8,000 followers posted about it beforehand. They shared the story, the countdown, and the whole plan. By the time the night happened, they were constantly on their phone. They spent most of the night angling shots of the food. They were checking who had viewed their story throughout the dinner. At the end of the night, the birthday person spoke quietly. They said they didn't think the guest was really there. 8,000 followers got a version of that dinner. But the 12 people at the table got much less of that guest. The guest who didn't use their phone at all, didn't post anything. They talked to everyone and remembered details from months ago. They left without documenting a single moment of the night. The birthday person texted them the next morning to say thanks. That contrast is the thing I want to pull apart today. The psychology of why some people never feel the pull to document, or why others walked away from it entirely, is quite interesting. It is more validating than you would expect. I will start with the uncomfortable truth. Some people didn't quit social media because they were healthy. Something usually drove them away from it, like a relationship ending, or a period of depression made the gap between their life and others unbearable. Someone posted something genuine and got either ignored or misunderstood. The exposure of that vulnerability left a residue that didn't fade. For a lot of people, leaving wasn't a calm, considered decision. It was closer to self-preservation, and that's worth naming. The narrative that private people are just more evolved is a little too clean. Sometimes they're just people who got hurt by the machine and decided not to go back. That's a completely valid reason and someone's truth. What's interesting is what happens after, because almost universally, you'll recognize this. The people who left describe a specific sensation a few weeks in. Something quiets down, not fear of missing out. Closer to the opposite, actually. Like a background noise you'd stopped noticing was suddenly gone. You realize you hadn't heard silence in years. When you ask them what they miss, most have to think for a long time. Then they usually say something like, "I don't really miss it at all." There's research that helps explain why that quiet happens. A study found that when people anticipated sharing an experience, they enjoyed it less. It's the mental act of preparing to document something that pulls you out of it, and simultaneously packaging it for an audience. You're living the moment. Those two things compete, and the memory you form becomes shallower. You form less of an emotional attachment to it. Private people felt that cost, and at some point, they stopped paying it. These people were often told they were weird or different. There's this reflexive suspicion that gets aimed at anyone who won't participate. Opting out of visibility is inherently a confession of something. Discovering that there's actual psychological reasoning behind how they've always felt. That lands differently than just being told you're right. The psychological term that's most relevant here is private self-consciousness. The tendency to focus inward, to examine your own thoughts and feelings, rather than monitoring how you're being perceived. People high in private self-consciousness aren't detached from the world. They're actually more attuned to it, just on the inside. They notice what they actually feel about something, rather than what they're supposed to feel. They ask, "What do I think about this?" rather than "How does this look to others?" In a culture optimized for outward performance, that orientation can feel like a defect. It most certainly isn't. What it creates is a sense of self. It seems you're closer to being ahead of a conversation that's only now starting to catch up. It seems you're closer to being ahead of a conversation that's only now starting to catch up.